I am just sick and tired of doing things that don't make a difference. When I look at you, when I talk to you, when I get your emails, when I look and hear from people around the country, when I watch the news, when I read the polls, the American people are angry, aren't we? Right? How much lower can approval ratings get for anybody in government? Right? And why are they angry? Because they feel completely detached from their government. They're angry because they feel like they've been played for fools. They're angry because they know they don't count. They know their vote doesn't count. They know their representative doesn't represent them. And they're mad. And I'm not talking about the Tea Party, am I? I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about minorities. I'm talking about young people. I'm talking about Americans in general have had it up to here. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is they want to go somewhere. They need to put that somewhere. They're looking for an answer. Are they getting an answer from Barack Obama? Anybody think he's given them an answer? Has he not totally destroyed any credibility he might have had? It's gone. Are they getting it from the Republican Party? Do you think Republicans are happy? No, they're not. So it's got to come from somewhere. And I believe it's got to come from us. I believe that if we lead, they are ready to follow. And if they follow, we will be the power. And we will be able to make the change that we want to make. But I go back to the problem I have with Jim Jordan. I go back to this whole thing of sending Matt Lynch to Columbus. To do what? To get destroyed? To get eviscerated? To be attacked? I don't do that to my friends. I don't do that to people I care about. Listen to what I'm saying to you. I'm telling you that we need to change our structure, our organization, that we need to become an army of one, that we have to completely change tactics in this war. But I'm also saying to you that we need to think long term, and we need to invest in that future. So let me put this scenario to you. Because going into Christmas break, I was talking to you about two things. The precinct project, right? Where we're going to find people to run for every precinct, and we're going to take over the central committee in each county and in the state. And why? So they could endorse conservative candidates. And then I talked to you about the second part, which was, why take over the central committees if you don't have any candidates for them to endorse? Right? So I was saying to you, we're going to recruit people to run. We're going to recruit people to run for office. And we're going to recruit people to do what? Be on their campaign staffs, right? I've been preaching this to you. We've been talking about this. We've been doing this. And then I realized that none of that would work. None of that would work if we don't fix the system first. And here's why. If we do all of that, we take over the central committees, we get people to run, we elect them, we send them off to Columbus or to the county commissioners, or we send them off to Washington, D.C., and they go there and they get destroyed, and they come back, what's going to happen? Nobody will run anymore, will they? Nobody will believe us. You can't just send them there and not defend them. You can't spend the effort to send Matt Lynch there and then not be able to hold your position. That's a basic military tactic. It's hard to get a beachhead. You can't give it up. And so I started researching. And I start thinking about, what is our problem? What is keeping us from having representation? What is keeping us enslaved? And the answer is really simple. It really is. When you go to Columbus and we elected you, and you're a nice guy and you say, I'm going to represent you, and you go there, the party can say to you, if you don't vote the way we tell you, we're going to take your job. Right? What are they going to do? They're going to primary you? Can you say Sarah LaTourette? Right? We're going to have more money than you? Right? And we're going to take you out. So guess what, folks? Until we fix that, how do we win that game? How do we win that game? That's a losing hand, isn't it? We can't do that. So I start thinking about, there's only two ways to handle that. One way is, if they can take their job, then maybe we ought to be able to take their job. So if we could take their job too, then at least it would be a balance of power. And I came up with this whole thing, and Rich Youngblood will tell you about it, these pages and pages of things that you're not going to see tonight, that are really cool, by the way, that would have taken our legislature and made them part-time and all that stuff. But the other way to do it is to take the power away from them to take their job. So, and many of you guys know me and laugh about, all the reading and stuff I do, and, I'm such a wonk when it comes to this stuff, and you get all my emails and say, can't believe this guy reads all this nonsense. But I was trying to understand when in Ohio history, and I knew it was under Governor Rhodes, that they decided that we needed, now get this, a professional legislature like Michigan has. Great idea. Anytime you want something like Michigan, you're from Ohio, you already know you're in trouble. And Governor Rhodes said, we need a professional legislature like Michigan. So I was actually trying to find out, what bill did that? How did they do that? And thinking maybe we could repeal that bill and say, we don't want, professional legislatures. We would like citizen legislators. So I was researching that, and the long story short on that was, they didn't pass a bill. This was a progressive move in the 60s across the country where they started talking about, oh my gosh, geez, Lanny's my representative. He's got his business, but Lanny's saying, I'm spending 50 hours a week being a legislature. I should be full-time as a House member. And everybody goes, that's right. He's working full-time. He should be full-time. So in 1970, a House member was making like $12,000 a year. 10 years later, they were making like $44,000 a year. They just kept raising the price. They just kept raising the pay. And that's how they became full-time. That's how they became full-time. And so we couldn't repeal it because there was nothing to repeal. So then, and it's probably going to be hard for you to see this, but this is from a book. And I'm doing a research like the week before Christmas, and there's actually a thing called the Library of Ohio. Everybody ever hear of that? Anybody ever hear that? It's called the Library of Ohio. This is an interesting little animal. It's based in Columbus. It's funded to the teeth, okay? And it keeps like all the records of the government. It's a library that keeps like all the records of the House and the Senate and all that stuff. But it also is a place where they funnel money into it that goes out to libraries throughout Ohio. It's called the Library of Ohio. Didn't even know it existed. Stumbled across it. So I thought, well, maybe these people would know something. So I called down there, get the reference desk lady. This is like the Monday before Christmas, right? I don't even think they're going to be open. She's open. And I say, I'm looking to find out about how, we became professional legislators. And I'm looking for, like an archivist or someone who could point out a bill or whatever. And she said, well, let me do some research and I'll let you know. And sure enough, it's amazing. Like 2 hours later, she sends me an email. And she said, I found a book and there's a chapter on that. And she sent me the name of the book, And there's only 2 copies of it in Northeast Ohio. One was at the Akron U Law School, one was at Cleveland. And so I went and got this book. And it's an incredible book. It's a book about the history of the Ohio House of Representatives. It was authored in 2009, and it wasn't subsidized for. The Ohio House demanded that someone write this book about them, okay? And they got all their crony buddies like AT&T and all the lobbyists to pay for it. And a professor who, a lawyer who actually works for the House, wrote the book. And it's called The House in Session. It is a history of Ohio politics. Amazing book. Should be mandatory reading for every high school student in the state. Amazing book. And here was my first take on it. All the complaining that we've done to each other tonight while we're getting a coffee or a snack, all the bitching and moaning we've done, you can go to page like 197, and they were saying the same thing in 1834. In 1834, they were saying, they don't represent me, they're controlled by special interests, they're all a bunch of crooks, blah, blah, blah. You can go another 75 pages, and in 1912, they're saying the same thing. Okay? This is not new. This is not new. But in reading that book, I learned an awful lot. And I came across something I had never, ever heard of. And that is this thing that's called the People's Right of Instruction. The People's Right of Instruction. And that's what you've got in front of you. Okay? The People's Right of Instruction. And what this means, now think about it. We've been brainwashed, right? We've been taught since we were little, well, you vote. And you should probably vote for like the smartest people in your community, someone who's got a good education, somebody who's, brighter than the rest of us. And you send them to be your representative. Okay? And then they're going to look at things and they're going to decide what's best for you, right? Isn't that really what they've said to us? Right? Isn't that what they've told us? Yeah. Except for one problem. In 1802, when Ohio became a state and was no longer part of the Northwest Territory, in our first Constitution, it said that people have the right to instruct their representatives how to vote. And they would meet at the Suffield Town Hall, and they would discuss the governor's plan to dig the Erie Canal, and they would consider whether they thought that was a good idea for their tax dollars to be used for, and they would vote, and they would tell their House member and their senator to vote no. And you know what? They considered it a matter of honor to do so. This started in the 1700s in England. The only reason it wasn't in it was in the Virginia Constitution and most of the New England colonies Constitution before our country started, the right of instruction. The only reason it wasn't in the U.S. Constitution is our good buddy Madison, right, the Federalist, argued against it because he didn't want the people to have control of the federal government. They discussed it. They took it out. In 1834, this was still enacted. A Ohio congressman from Cincinnati, a U.S. congressman from Cincinnati, resigned as a congressman because the people in Cincinnati had a meeting and told him how to vote, and he didn't feel he could morally do that, and he resigned. In 1852, it was back in the Constitution. And it was in most of the constitutions, state constitutions around the country until the Civil War. And what happened was, during the Civil War, Andrew Jackson, before the Civil War, the southern states were using the right to instruct to basically control the federal government from making slavery illegal. They were instructing their senators and House and congressmen to vote a certain way. And so Andrew Jackson made a big deal of that. And so it kind of made this instruction like a bad thing, like an evil thing, okay? Like it was, it was wrong. It was being used for evil purposes. So throw it out. But here's what really killed it. Here's what really killed it. What killed it was that they finally decided, because, they didn't want you common people. And by the way, read this book. and you'll love what they think of you. They'll love what they thought of your grandparents and your great-grandparents. They think you're dumber than a rock. All they talk about through the whole history, the Ohio legislature, is how dumb you are and how incapable you are of understanding anything, and you're so lucky to have them to tell you how to live. Okay? It's amazing. But here's the bottom line. So what they did to get out of this was they basically said, when we got bigger, when Ohio started growing, we started having cities, as they said, and they were partially right. They said, you know what? There's no way to really tell how you're instructing me. Because they didn't have the little Suffield town halls. They didn't have, the little, Palmyra village there to meet in. They had Cleveland, okay, and immigrants pouring in. People can't speak English and nobody knows what's going on. Okay? They didn't have the internet. So when I say that I would like to pass a constitutional amendment, and if you read, with me on your sheets there, where it is on one page it's written, it basically says, we want to return the right to instruct our representatives to the citizens of Ohio to ensure that our elected officials will vote as instructed by the people in their districts on important issues at the township, village, city, county, municipal, state, and federal levels. The people's right of instruction, which had previously been part of the Ohio Constitution, shall hereby be reinstituted, expanded, and strengthened. It will be the law of the state of Ohio from January 1st, 2017 forward, that any representative duly elected by a popular vote of the people will henceforth be required by law to follow the instructions of the registered voters in their jurisdiction on how they must vote on any vote required of them for which the public chooses to provide instruction. This shall apply to any and all representatives elected by citizens of Ohio to any local, state, or federal legislative office. How many of you would like to be able to instruct your representatives? How many people do you know that would like to be able to instruct their representatives? Right? For too long, when we've tried to do things, we've taken our petitions to the people who voted in the last 4 primaries and are super active, right? We've gone to those people because they're voters and they're active. I dream of the day, because I believe in the American people, and I know they're not stupid. I know they're a lot smarter than these people ruling over us. I look for the day when we can knock on the door of the guy that hasn't voted in 10 years and say to that person, you haven't voted in 10 years, why? And they're going to say, because my vote doesn't count. And you're going to say, well, how would you like to be able to instruct them on how to vote? And he's going to say, I like that. Where do I sign? Right? And remember when I talked about trust? Remember when I talked about leadership? When I talked about being in your precinct, being an army of one? Is anybody else going to knock on their door with anything like this? Anybody else care about them? Does anybody else give a damn whether they have a vote or a say? Because I guarantee you, after this passes, we're not going to spend our time instructing our representatives. We're busy. But you know what we're going to do? We're sure as heck going to instruct them about Common Core. We're sure as heck going to instruct them about Medicaid expansion. Right? We're sure as heck going to instruct them about the things that are important to us. So I look at it like this. It's kind of like having a handgun at your house in case of a burglary. The odds are you're not going to have a burglary. But you sure feel good about having that gun there in case there is, right? So I don't know whether this guy's going to let me down or not respect me and not represent me. But if he doesn't, I'd sure like to have this way to instruct him, wouldn't I? Now, here's what that does, though, to change the game. So now, why would the special interests bribe your representative to vote when they can't control their vote? Why would the party say, Hank, if you don't vote our way, we'll get rid of you? And you say, my hands are tied, it's the law. They just instructed me, the vote's cast. Pretty tough for them to fire you for that, huh? How would you like to instruct your school board on that union contract? You'd like to have that vote? Yeah, how'd you like to instruct the county commissioners on whether they're going to triple your license plate fees? These are big challenges. I've been struggling like heck to get this off the ground. In order to put this on the ballot in November, we would have to get 450,000 signatures on petitions by July 6th. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that. My problem is I can't get a lawyer to represent us. I've just been turned down today by the 6th lawyer I've approached. I can't get a lawyer to represent us. I can't get this because what the process is we have to take this and they have to do some legal things to this. And then we have to get 1,000 signatures. And we submit it to the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. And they make sure the signatures are correct. And then they make sure that, that everything's legal about it. And then they submit it to this board. And this board then will look at it and make sure that it doesn't confuse people, the language is correct, etc. Except, you know what they're going to do? Who's on the board? Are we on the board? We're not on the board, right? How much fun do you think they're going to have if this comes across the board? They're going to be challenging us everywhere you can challenge us. They're going to question every period, every T, right? And we're going to have to fight them in court to get through that. Because they're going to see this as a threat to their power. And it is. It's intended to be. I'm sick of asking. I want to tell you how to vote. I don't care how you want to vote. You're going to vote the way I tell you. And that's the way it should be, shouldn't it? Because, think about it. If you hire an attorney to represent you in a real estate deal, right? You're paying the attorney. Does he just go negotiate any deal he wants to negotiate and you're stuck with it? He can't do that, can he? Why? Because you're paying him and you're paying for the real estate. So what's different about your representative? You're paying him to be your representative, and what they're voting on, you're paying for. That's what I call representation. That's what I want, is representation. All I want is a fair deal. And this is how we get it. So we're going to try this because I think this works. But if we get there, are you willing to work your butt off to get this passed? Are you willing to be American Sniper? You said you're willing to go to jail. You said you'd be willing to take your money out of your bank account. You said you'd be willing to fight for freedom. I'm counting on that. You and thousands of others. Because I know what you can do. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know what we can do as a Tea Party. I'm not afraid of anything or anybody. I'm not afraid of anybody. Because I know the American people are stronger than anybody that ever existed. Because there's nothing stronger than free men and women fighting for their own freedom. But this is the way it's going to change. And I wanted you to hear this from my mouth. I want you to understand it. I want you to think about it. And I want you to start thinking about ideas of what we can do. We have power. The middle class has power. We have economic power. We have political power to some degree. We have power of our intellect, our intelligence. We have social power. They are destroying us. They are killing us. How do we leverage what we already have to defeat them? How do we leverage what we already have to force our will upon the people who are forcing their will upon us? That's the question that I'm grappling with every day. That's the answer that we need. That's what we need to do to succeed. And I believe we will succeed. They have seen nothing yet. You drop this out there. Can you imagine the media coverage of this? Can you imagine the hue and cry? But you know what? I would love to have that conversation, wouldn't you? I would love to talk about how we're not represented. I would love to talk about why we need this. I would love to talk about how they gerrymandered the districts, and we have no choice, and our votes don't count, and people aren't showing up. I want to have that conversation. Because you know why? The American people will rally to that, and that will give us even more power. All right. That's more than enough. I hope you feel a little warmer than you felt when you came here. I think maybe I got you thinking a little brain power. So I'll be around, at the end of this. I know it's getting late. I don't want to keep you too late. If you have a question, I'll answer. Go ahead. Yeah, if you read the rest of the papers there, it's spelled out in the second paragraph, okay? And those are important questions. I've worked very hard to answer those questions. And there are also people who are worried. And this is the thing, how many of you guys remember Seth Morgan when he came and talked to us about his book, It's About Liberty, Stupid? Anybody remember that? Okay? Do you remember the lesson of his book? The lesson of his book was that if you believe in liberty, then your goal should not be to say, those people are using the law to take my liberty, so I want to use the law to take theirs. The goal should be to get rid of the law so we all have liberty. And I've had some people said their problem with this is, my God, the left could instruct people. The left could do that. Right? What if they vote and they get to instruct? Well, let me ask you a question. Aren't they already doing that? Is the left winning their levies because the union money? Is the left winning their elections because of stuff? But we're not, are we? So the worst case that happens to us is we actually get the chance that they already have. They lose and we win. Right? I'm not afraid of that. I'm ready to take them on because I know we're more engaged. I know if I have an app for that you're going to just take your phone on your lunch hour and go, well, what are we voting on here? Oh, Common Core, I read about that. No, vote no. But here's the most important thing. Here's the most important thing. Today, last week, 2 weeks ago, when Tom Z calls you up, sends you an email, says, oh, they're voting on John Boehner. Call your representative, send them emails and tell them to vote no. Did they do it? Was it worth your time? No. They totally ignored you. But if you're sitting there at your computer or on your smartphone or on the telephone and you vote no on Common Core and it says the vote is now 55% no, 45% yes, and only 28% have voted, you've got a reason to call your neighbor, to call your brother, to go to the lunchroom and talk to your fellow employees and say, hey, we got to stop this. If we get 2 more percentage points, they got to do what we tell them. You don't have any reason to do that today, do you? You don't have any reason to educate them. Now it's personal. Now it's my vote. Now I can instruct. How's that for what our founding fathers wanted? How's that for we the people running our government? How's that for government of the people, by the people, for the people? That's what we're trying to do.